Aloha, my name is Julie Mitchell, and I'm the Executive Director here at Ikahi Mediation Center. Welcome to our Finding Solutions Growing Peace Brown Bag Lunch Series. Ikahi is a nonprofit community mediation center, and we serve East Hawaii. We were founded in 1983 as a program of the Island of Hawaii YMCA, and in 2006, became our own independent nonprofit. So next year will be 40 years. Our mission is to empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options and to find their own best solutions. To achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and training like this brown bag talk to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. Our brown bag lunch series is held every third Thursday at 12 noon on Zoom, and you do need to register on Eventbrite each time to receive the Zoom link. If you like this talk, please feel free to register for more in the future. Our next speakers, let me say, there's three of them, will be on June 16th, and that's Troy Andrade, Charles Crumpton, and Elizabeth Kent, and they're speaking on the topic Finding Pilina, Effective Communication Through Relationship Building. And I'm going to put the link to register for that in the chat if you would like to go ahead and just do that while you are here. At the end of our talk today, we are going to ask you to click into the chat on a link for a short online survey, and that helps with our grant funding for this free series. And so when I put the survey link in the chat, just take a moment to click into it and give us your thoughts. And I will also send out an email later with the slides, any handouts the presenter provides, and a video link. And along with the link again to that evaluation form. So please do let us know your thoughts, especially ideas for upcoming brown bags. And we are always looking for speakers. So if you or someone you know would like to present a brown bag, please do indicate that either in the chat to me privately, shoot me an email, or put it in your evaluation form, because we definitely want to have new and interesting speakers joining us. If you're not sure whether I have your contact information, you can send it your email in the chat box. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our topic and our speaker today. Today, you'll be hearing a talk on empathy, the path to understanding, with Jo Hittner. Jo has a PhD, and she's worked in the counseling psychology field for over 40 years. She holds a doctorate in counseling from the University of North Dakota, Grand Forks. Before retirement, she was a professor at Winona State University in Minnesota. Currently, Jo is a professionally trained volunteer mediator at Ikahi Mediation Center. Thank you, Jo. Empathy and its effects are at the core of her beliefs in making the world a more peaceful place. And Jo, please do take it away.
All right. Thank you, Julie. And it is really good to see so many people here. A few I know, and there are a lot of you I don't. So we will just start out this PowerPoint presentation and talk about empathy. And at the end, I have a question and answer period, and we will see how this all goes. And technology is not my thing. It used to be not my strong point. It's just not my thing. So I'm going to see if I can get back to sharing the screen and getting onto the PowerPoint, and bear with me while I work at this. All right. So we're talking about empathy, and it's the path I thought was a good way of explaining it to understanding. And here we go. Okay. So when Julie asked me to do a presentation, I realized that it's been a while since I have been teaching at the university and thought I haven't been doing any current research. And so, what am I going to talk about? And one of the things that came to mind was empathy. And the reason for that started a long time ago. And it was, I was working at a community mental health center as a psychologist and worked primarily with children. And one client in particular was, I'd say, a 10, 11-year-old boy coming from an intact family. Things were going well, but he had no empathy. And it puzzled me because it's like, how do you teach empathy? And that has continued to puzzle me. And I didn't have an answer then. And after today, I still don't have a really good answer, but hopefully I have a better answer. So, what we're going to do is take a journey together through what I found intriguing and interesting in looking at empathy, its roots, its beginnings, its development, and how we as people who want to promote peace can improve our empathy skills and improve our communication skills through empathy. And one of the things that we need to do is, as we go through that door to empathy, is on this side of the door, we have to let go of all sorts of things. And interestingly, as I was doing my journey in research, tidbits came here and there from everywhere. And one of the things that I ordered a book called I Never Thought of It That Way, that is a new release. And the author, Monica Guzman, was talking about looking at highly heated political situations from another person's point of view. And I thought, that's kind of what empathy is about. And she talks about an SOS. She says, we just do this sort of thing. It comes naturally to us where we sort. And when we look at situations, we look at, these are people who are like me. These are people who are different from me. These are people who I think I will like. These are people I think I won't like. And we sort them into different categories. And then she says we go into othering, where we start saying, those people out there and us. And then she said we start siloing. And we go into these compartments where we will listen to people who we have sorted and put in our side or our likes or those kinds of things. And if we're going to be empathic, we have to leave all of that on this side of the door. And Kimberly Dark, who has done a number of these brown bag lunches, and I've learned so much from her, talks about biases and that we have unconscious biases, that we have them, we don't even know we have them. And we have to leave those at this door. So our biases, our othering, our assumptions, all of those things have to be left on this side of the door. Because if we take them into the empathy room, it isn't going to work. And so it's critical, for one, to improve our knowledge of ourselves and know what our biases, assumptions, knowledge of others, all of those things are, in order to gain empathy skills. So let's take our little journey into this room. And a book called Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life by Marshall Rosenberg talked about and I have to move the pictures to see what's on here. Emptying our mind and listening with our whole being. And what I found with empathy is that it is one step or more beyond active listening. Active listening being listening for what the other person is saying or not saying, and reflecting back what we're hearing from them. But empathy is emptying our minds. And again, it's that taking away our assumptions, our biases, our belief systems, and being able to bring that other person's thoughts and feelings and and in the next slide we'll say it's, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, so I'm going to go to the next slide. It's seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. And that is, it looks easy, it sounds easy, but it's really very difficult, because what we want to do is have an argument or a discussion or a dialogue, and empathy is not that. It is being able to get into who that other person is and be with them as they have a conversation. And Les is my husband, and he has listened to empathy now for ever since I told Julie that I would be willing to give this talk. And so every time I come up with something new, I run it past him, and he says things like, well, is that a one-sided dialogue or a one-sided conversation? And I thought about that, and it's like, yes, it is you as the listener letting go of everything about yourself to be with that other person from their point of view. And so, again, in this journey, there was an article that Les gave me on Big Think. And in the reference sections at the end of this presentation on the PowerPoint are links to all of these things, so you can get further information about what is going on in these books and articles. But it was amazing to me how businesses are coming around to saying, we're finding that empathy is working in businesses. And counselors are saying we need to be more empathic, and nurses are saying we need to be more empathic. And it's kind of like the word of the day of let's be empathic. So in this big article, they talked about 3 kinds of empathy. And one, cognitive empathy, where a person is able to understand what someone else might be feeling and thinking. And the word cognitive is the operative word here of it's in your head. And that is not the whole totality of empathy. Then we go to emotional empathy or affective empathy, where someone is able to share another person's feelings. But when you get down to the compassionate empathy, it's where the person takes an action as a result of someone's feelings. In a story I read, I don't even remember where it was on the internet somewhere, where a woman was taking meals to homeless people. So that was her daytime job. And she was going into a convenience store for something, bypassed a guy that she had seen a few times, knew that he wasn't as cognitively good as he could be. So he had some cognitive impairments, and he was sitting there. It was in Florida, it was hot. She saw that he needed water. and went into the store and just grabbed a bottle of water, told the clerk, because there was a line, I'm taking this out to the guy outside. I'll be back in to take care of all of this. And somebody in the line started saying, what are you doing this for? Why are you doing that? That person is not needing anything, and you're just being inappropriate. And so she took the water out to the guy, and then other people in line, as they got to the front desk thing, said, I'll take a sandwich out to the guy out there, or I'll take some more water out there. And it was this compassionate empathy that got to be repeated. So one person sees a need of a person, responds to it, and then other people are responding. And the person who was putting down the woman was pretty embarrassed by the response of everybody else. And we'll see when we talk about how empathy starts that it's very mirroring. We see it with someone and we imitate it or we repeat it, and it grows. So empathy is not just a conversation, it can also be action. And it's kind of like talk and no action is not going to make as much of a change as action following the talk is going to do. Okay. All right, so we talk about empathy, but a lot of people confuse sympathy and empathy. And in this article, again, in the reference section, you can get more on this. But this author says that sympathy involves understanding from your own perspective. And so I am with somebody who is hurting, and I say, I am so sorry for your pain, or I feel bad because of this. And a story I have that goes with that is that I went to work after my father's death, and people knew that I was away from work because of a death in the family. And so I got asked, how are you? How are things going? Who died? All of that. And I mentioned to somebody that it was my dad. Well, and interestingly, I mentioned it to more than one person, but each time I would get stories of those other people telling about deaths of their fathers. And it's like, that was really cool, but that isn't what I needed at that point at all. I needed somebody to say, how are you? How are you doing? How are you taking this? How are you dealing with the loss or whatever? But the focus on me rather than on them. And that's the sympathy versus empathy. And then compassion versus empathy. And the Book of Joy is a really lovely book. If you aren't familiar with it, I highly recommend it. It is the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu having a conversation with a third person about the Book of Joy. These are two guys who have suffered immensely, intensely for long periods of time, and they talk about joyfulness. But they also say that compassion is what connects the feeling of empathy to kindness, generosity, and other feelings of altruistic tendencies. And I see it as kind of the WD-40 or the lubricant between all these things that keeps things working and moving and being fluid. And so empathy and compassion can often be used interchangeably, but there's some subtle differences, and they're not as important as the difference between sympathy and empathy, because compassion will lead you to be empathic. Sympathy may get you there, but it's going to be a longer route. Okay, so where does empathy come from? And a book that I read, and it's old now, but there are new revisions, is Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. And he has a whole book on emotional intelligence. And it was like, well, if I tell you all about the book, we will never get this talk finished. I could do that for a long time. So I highly recommend that book as well, to take a look at where does empathy come from and what happens when we are empathic or not empathic. And he talks about it being in neurobiology. And there was a researcher who did an experiment with rhesus monkeys. And the interesting thing there is we're talking non-humans here, even though they're primates, but the monkeys were given a tone, and the tone preceded a shock. And then they had a lever where they could prevent the shock. So they finally figure out the tone, the shock, the lever undoes the shock. The tone, you push the lever, you don't get the shock. And they were placed, after they learned that piece, they were placed in rooms where they could see each other. And they could see the expressions on each other's faces. And monkey A is watching monkey B as the tone goes and his face has a look. And monkey A pulls the lever so that monkey B doesn't get the shock. And so Goleman is saying, we see this in animals, and this one is just more obvious, but we see it in animals in many, many ways. And, you know, you go on Facebook and you see mother geese nurturing chickies, or, you know, animal groups taking care of other babies from other animal groups, and having that empathy that says, you are not going to do well, I can help you, I will do something about it. We also see it in infants at very young ages, where one infant will start crying and another infant will hear that cry and start crying. Or there was an instance where these mothers were being observed on how they're caring for their infants and so forth. And one infant saw another infant uncomfortable. And the first infant cuddled into his mother in order to get nurturing, because, I mean, he hadn't figured out that if he gets it, that other baby isn't necessarily going to. But it was that response of, I see pain and I'm going to do something about it. So we see it in very young ages. And what made me wonder about things is, how do we lose it? If we're seeing this at the very beginning of our existence, how do we get the people who don't have any empathy and become serial killers, or, you know, people who can do harm to others and not care? I don't have that answer, but we'll go on to empathy and communication. And we're better than the robots sitting at the table. And what is important here is that empathy and communication involve the head and the heart. And we can't just lop off our heads and only have our hearts. But the feelings part of empathy is absolutely critical and much more important than the head. And if we can put our thinking aside and use our feelings, we go a lot further in that communication. And this little drawing is of communication from an author that I had in graduate school 100 years ago on couples communication. And what this person said was that good communication is when intent equals impact. And so we've got a speaker. I wanted that mouth up there, but I couldn't get it there. The speaker is saying something, but he has a filter. And that speech has to go to the listener, and that listener has a filter. And so if the speaker can get through his filter and through her filter, so that what he wants to say has an impact on what she is willing to hear, we've got good communication. And these filters are our biases, our assumptions, our experiences, all of our history, our past, and everything that goes with it. And each person has those filters. And so if we're going to have the listener have an impact, or we need to be understanding our own filters and the filters of the other person. And that's where the rubber meets the road. It's really hard. But empathy, if we're aware of our filters, we can look at what are the filters of the other person and then be able to hear what the other person is saying. Okay, so empathic listening is observing, looking for the feelings, and then looking for the needs of that person in our listening. And feelings, Rosenberg in his nonviolent communication quoted Rollo May, who is a psychoanalyst, and he says, the mature person becomes able to differentiate feelings into as many nuances, strong and passionate experiences, or delicate and sensitive ones as in the different passages of music in a symphony. For many of us, our feelings are limited like notes in a bugle call. I loved it. And I have been saying for years that when we're born, we're given a box of crayons. And there are 6 to 10 crayons in that box. And throughout our life, we gain more crayons so that as adults, we've got that big 48 or 100 box of crayons. And that's wonderful when that happens. But many people stay back as in childhood with their 6 or 8 box crayons. And so I found, again, this is Rosenberg, had a list of feelings and a list of needs. And we're going to talk about those. And Julie, if you could put that slide up, because again, my technology skills all of a sudden went kerplunk and I can't get it up on my computer. Okay, so he talks about these feelings when your needs are satisfied. And if you look, there are the bold words and then the lighter words. And for affectionate, for example, we've got all sorts of words that go with that. Oh, you're good, Julie. Thank you. So we've got affectionate, engaged, hopeful, confident, excited, grateful, inspired, exhilarated, peaceful, refreshed. And this is the 100-box crayon feelings. And then scroll down, Julie, to when your needs are not satisfied. And we've got, these are the ones, and I don't know, it's kind of like some people are terribly afraid of having feelings. Some people say, and when I was doing counseling and I'd say, tell me what your feelings are, and they'd look at me like I had 3 eyes in my head, and it's like, feelings? What feelings? And so it was a process of helping people to identify their own feelings and to see the abundance, the symphony of words that we have for feelings that are not only good but bad. And many people have bad, sad, mad, and glad. I've got those and I've got them down and I understand those. But look at these words that talk about how we feel when we are afraid, there's a whole list, and annoyed, disconnected, embarrassed, tense, and so forth. So you will be getting this list as a handout. And what Rosenberg talks about is that needs and feelings intersect, and that when our needs are not met, we have feelings that are very different from when our needs are met. And scroll back to, we've got the not satisfied. These are the feelings we feel when people have our needs taken care of. So I'll go back to the homeless guy outside the convenience store. Just imagine what he was feeling as people were giving him food, and he was kind of unaware that maybe he even needed it because he had cognitive difficulties. But the gratefulness, the peacefulness, refreshed, all of those. So my recommendation to everybody is take these lists, put them somewhere where you can see them, and during the day, just do a quick check of what am I feeling? And if you can do that on a regular basis, your crayon box is going to grow. So Julie, if you can go to the next one on needs. Okay, here they are. So these are what Rosenberg talks about, basic human needs that we all need to have met. And when these needs are not met, we have a set of feelings. And when these needs are met, we have another whole set. And he says this is not the whole list. This is just some that he came up with. And another suggestion is to have these words in front of you or someplace where you can see them and see, are these needs being met? And if they're not, what can I do to get them met? And what are the feelings when, for example, honesty is right there in front of me, when I don't think the people around me are authentic or have integrity or aren't acknowledging my presence? What are my feelings? What can I do about it? And that's step one to being empathic to others. If we are unaware of those range of feelings and needs, it's really hard to figure out what the other person's are. So thank you, Julie. Now I have to go back somewhere. Okay, I think I have to share the screen again. Okay, cool. All right, so we've got the needs vocabulary and the feelings vocabulary. And so just looking at it from a very selfish point of view, when our needs and our feelings are in that positive list, we look like one of these people. When our needs and our feelings are not met, we look like the other one of these. And if you can figure out which one has empathy and needs and feelings being taken care of, it's like Hitler didn't get that, but Gandhi did. And I just get amazed at people like Gandhi or the Dalai Lama or Desmond Tutu, of people. These people weren't living these wonderful, beautiful perfect lives. They were in situations where they suffered, and they suffered a lot for a long time. But they got their needs taken care of, and people were empathic with them, and they were empathic with other people. Okay, so when our feelings and needs are taken care of, we have huge personal benefits. And then professional benefits. This was another one of those studies that was in Forbes. And again, it's in the references, where the article was called Empathy is the Most Important Leadership Skill. And they did a study of 889 people. And they found that in workplaces where there was empathy versus non-empathy in that workplace amongst the leaders giving empathy to their workers, 61% more innovation versus 13% in just innovation. Engagement of people in their work, 76% versus 32%. In retention, white women, it was 57% versus 14%. Women of color, 62% versus 32%. And I keep thinking of when I was working in various jobs, it's like retention was so important because there's so much time and money and effort that is lost when people come and go and come and go. And if empathy is a way to keep people in these positions, it's wonderful. And inclusivity was 50% versus 17%. And the work-life ratio, I see what's covering it. It's my picture. Work-life ratio was 80% versus 60%. People thought that the work-life balance was way better when there were empathic leaders. So I'm looking at the time, and holy moly, here we are. So I have a situation to talk about, but need to have some time for questions and answers. So let's go through just one situation. And we're going to need the feelings and needs again, Julie. And so put the feelings up, and let's go with the feelings that are not met. Yeah, that's the needs. Yeah, there you go. Okay, when the not met, perfect. All right, so here is the situation, and what I would like from you is to look through this feelings list. And then I look at that and it's like, can you read it? Hopefully you can. And see what your feelings are in this situation. And then we'll go to what the other person might be feeling. So your friend is visiting at your home and is telling you about a wonderful vacation they had. It was an expensive one that you would never be able to afford. And they're telling you about all the exciting things they did and all the things they were able to see and buy. And as you look at those feelings, just shout out an answer that you would have of what feelings are you having as you're listening to this person talk about something that is unimaginable to you.
Are you wanting people to think about it or to share in the chat?
Share the feelings, just coming out with them.
People could type into the chat the feeling.
Oh, that would be perfect.
Yeah, and then I could read them out.
All right.
Envious, envy, restless. Happy for them.
Ooh, that one's nice. And the
Depending,
others are nice too.
depending on the friend, either happy or jealous.
Yes, exactly. So now switch it and looking at that impact, intent equals impact, go through your filter of I'm jealous and this is really hard and I'm never going to be able to get there, and then go to what are they needing and why are they telling you about this vacation? Are they telling you so that you feel bad? What kind of feelings might they be having and what need might they have that you can be empathic with them about?
Okay, so somebody typed validation.
Okay. So they're, yeah, it's like they had this experience and
Stimulation,
maybe,
interesting perspective to connect with me,
yeah.
excited to share an experience, wanting to connect.
All right. So let's go back then to the feelings and let's go with the ones where their needs are met. What words could you use with them to say, I'm with you? I am listening to you and I'm putting away my jealousy and my anger and my hurt and my whatever. And what words could you use to let them know that you are listening to them and are happy for them? Happy for them is sympathy, not empathy.
So open, that sounds amazing.
Yes.
Enthusiastic,
Yes.
amazed.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So those are the kinds of things, and we really, I thought I was going to be finished in 15 minutes. So we will get to questions and answers. I've got a couple more slides. So Julie, thank you. And we will go back. Oh, my little slide didn't get in there. So the summary part of this is what is asked of you is check your biases, know your feelings and needs, and then empty your mind, open your heart, and express empathy in words and actions. And for more information, you can go with these references that I put on there. And it's time for questions and answers. So I will stop sharing.
So people can ask a question in the chat box. You can unmute yourself and just ask a question. You can use the raise hand feature, which is this one where it puts your hand and it moves you to the top so we can see you because there's a lot of people here. Oh, someone was saying, can we see the reference page again? We are going to be sending out the full PowerPoint with the clickable links in the PDF. So you will get that afterwards if that's okay, if you don't need to see it right now. Okay, they said yes. So what questions do you folks have of Jo about empathy? Okay, here's one. Here's two. First one, in the business world, COVID generated more awareness for empathy for employees than maybe ever before. Yet there is the great resignation going on. Any thoughts about that?
Possibly. So the great resignation is take a look at what are the reasons from those people's points of view for leaving. Are they leaving because they realized that the job just wasn't taking care of their needs? It's kind of like you work from home and you're with your family, and then all of a sudden you realize that when you go to work and you commute for an hour each way, that you're spending less and less time with your family and you want to do that. Or that you're at peace with yourself and you have never felt that sort of thing because you're not getting along with your employer. I mean, there are a variety of reasons. Or it could be that you finally didn't pay for childcare and you realize that all of the money that you were spending in childcare you could save by staying at home and doing things differently. So, looking at from that person's perspective, what are the individual reasons for them leaving? And so it may not be that they need more empathy. They may need more family time or alone time, or it's as many reasons I would guess as people leaving.
And then another question is, how do you deal with an irritating person?
Okay. And I'm going to give this answer that seems simple and it's way more complicated than that. But most of the time, we really want not to be irritating. But when we are, it's because there's something going on that in some instances, if we are listened to, we can take, our feelings are heard, our needs are met, and our irritation goes down. And we talk about hanger, meaning you're angry when you're hungry. What are people hungry for? Are they being, what is their life situation? And that's where that empathy comes in, to be able to understand that person's point of view from their point of view and not from, I don't know how you would ever feel that way, is like, that's not empathy. It's what is going on with you that would get you to be that way? What are your life experiences? What are your concerns? What is not being met? And what are those feelings that go with that? And some people are just irritating. I loved the book, and I'm going to reference it here. I never thought of it that way. It's brand new, and it's a woman who takes a look at other people's thinking. And hers was kind of political. She talks about being a Biden supporter with Trump parents and figuring out how to get along. And it's absolutely fascinating. And it would work with irritating people to some extent, some of the time.
Here's a comment and then a question. One person wrote, in sci-fi, science fiction, for those of you not in the know, empaths are quite rare and special. Same in the real world.
Absolutely, but that doesn't mean they don't exist and we can't get better at it.
And then here's someone saying, I am in HR, human resources. How can I help inspire and develop empathy in our managers?
Okay. I'm not going to be able to answer that right now, but I would say go to that reference list and look at the emotional intelligence. And also there are just a number of articles that are being written and books that are being written on that topic. And I would urge you to do the research to see from managerial points of view how other people do it and what they're doing and what the barriers are and what the benefits are.
Another question or a comment is, a conversation is a dance. It is about making a connection and being in sync with the other. Dances don't have to go anywhere, and the same is true with a conversation, as long as you make a connection.
Awesome. I love that. That is awesome. And those connections don't have to be prolonged. I was thinking, Les and I were sitting in the living room the other day, and my nieces were coming to visit, and he said something, And I said, "You're feeling excited about them coming." And he said, "Yes." And I said, "That's empathy." So it's those just little moments here and there, being able to connect with the person at the feeling level. And there's a connection that is just amazing. It's magic.
Another question is asking, empathy should be unidirectional, meaning one way, I suppose. Is that what you're saying?
And I think it depends on how much empathy is needed. I mean, if somebody is talking about something very deep and hard and difficult, yes, it's one directional. And there was in all of this stuff, there was a video of Alan Alda talking about people who I would say are empaths. And he said, you can go too far in that. You get lost and you have to have boundaries and you need to take care of yourself. And I found as a psychologist that I had to, at the end of the day, take care of me because I felt like I was plugged into an outlet and everybody was just draining from me. Those were unidirectional conversations. But then I would have one with somebody that would give me back or talk about a bucket. When you've got your bucket is being emptied, you need a way to fill that bucket. So it's not like you give and give and give and never get. You've got to find a way to get in return. And it can be both ways. Day one, you're being empathic with person B, and day two, person B is being empathic with you, or something to that effect. But when you are letting go of yourself to get in somebody else's shoes, it's hard to jump back into your own shoes, and then it's like you be there, and then you have that conversation, and then you leave, and it's done.
Any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. Would anybody care to ask a live question? Type something in the chat. You can simply unmute yourself or raise your hand like I have so we can see you. Another comment I'm seeing is everyone needs to be heard.
And it's amazing what happens when a person feels heard. And I think in our mediation model, where we start out with everybody in the room together, and each party says what they came to mediation for and what they want to get out of it. Each party hears the other person's point of view. And that is, and then the mediator acknowledges that they have been heard. And change happens miraculously, magically, in many instances. At that moment, it's like it pivots because the person A is finally hearing person B for the first time in a safe place. And once you're heard, it just makes a huge difference.
Another comment, if we learn to listen to hear, we will likely be more empathetic than if we listen to reply.
Yes. And if we're listening to reply, we are not getting into the other shoes of that person or into the mind, the heart of where that other person is. And Monica Guzman in the I Never Thought of It That Way talks about she didn't understand Trump supporters, for example, until she said, what is it that resonates for you with this very different viewpoint from me? And when she was able to hear that other viewpoint, it was like, oh, that makes so much sense. To you, it's not going to change me, but I get where you're coming from. And empathy is not meant to change the other person to be like us.
Another person said, you can develop empathy by role playing. role playing. And then I think the HR, someone said HR, I'm guessing this is meaning that the HR question earlier could be having some practice sessions with the managers. That's my interpretation of that, if I'm reading that correctly.
Well, and another thing is, I was having a conversation with somebody that said something about me that I just thought was antithetical to who I am as a person. And I just said, where are you coming from with that? Because she was seeing me in a way that I didn't see myself. And as she's explaining this, it's like, I had no idea. I had no idea that I was coming across this way. And those are learning experiences of where people have the gumption to be able to say, you know, this gets in the way of who you are, and that self-awareness, being able to see again where intent equals impact is that the impact was very different because of my filter that I was totally unaware of.
Another person asked, any thoughts on empathy with teenagers?
Oh, teenagers are hard because their brains aren't developed, and they're trying to figure out who they are. But one of the things is asking questions instead of why did you do that, is something like how did that happen, or instead of, and part of listening is also tone of voice and nonverbals and all of the things that go into that. And it's like, what were you thinking versus what were you thinking? A tone makes a difference. And it's like, check your anger, your feelings at the door and go into that empathy of what is going on with them. And that often works. But again, that filter that we have, if you're trying to be empathic when you're angry, it's not going to work. If you're trying to be empathic when you're totally frustrated, it isn't going to work. And you have to be in a place where you can do that and saying, give me a day and we'll talk about this because I'm too angry right now. Or, let's go take some space and come back when each of us can be calmer. And we model to adolescents how to resolve conflict by our attitude and our interest in not just being domineering and authoritarian and saying you have to do it this way because I said so, and trying to figure out to help them process their thinking so that they figure it out.
Well, we have come to 1 o'clock, and so I would like to ask us all to give a big virtual round of applause for our speaker, Jo. Thank you so much for sharing your mana'o on empathy. I know we could probably talk for several days on this. I did put the link for the next brown bag in the chat if you want to register for that. And also please do click into our survey and just answer the few short questions there to help us with our grant funding. We appreciate all of you coming here today, and especially Jo for your talk. And do let us know if any of you would like to give a talk for our series, or if you know someone who would be great for our series. We'd love to hear about it. And you could put that in that our feedback survey as well. We will be sending out the slides and the needs and feelings handout, as well as the link to this video recording to you in the coming days. So please do keep your eyes out for that. And mahalo for joining us today, and we hope to see you next month. Aloha.
Bye-bye.